When Dracula drank holy blood, heaven turned to ashes. There are choices so forbidden that even the damned are warned never to make them. But what happens when the one who defied death itself dares to reach higher, beyond mortal blood, beyond earthly kingdoms, and takes what belongs only to the heavens? This is not the Dracula you know. This is a tale of a curse deepened, of a hunger that no longer sought men or kings, but the sacred itself. And once he crossed that line, the world would never recover. Before we continue, if you are drawn to these darker truths hidden inside the stories you thought you knew, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Each voice helps keep these shadows alive. It began in whispers carried through monasteries, a relic untouched by time, a chalice holding blood consecrated beyond all corruption. Dracula heard, and temptation grew like fire in his veins. He had fed on nobles, soldiers, even lovers, yet the taste left him hollow. Only one question consumed him. What would happen if he drank not from man, but from the divine? The night he found his answer was the night heaven itself began to burn. The wind howled across the Carpathian peaks, carrying with it the whispers of villagers who dared not speak his name aloud. Dracula's castle loomed like a scar against the night sky, its towers clawing at the heavens, a reminder that one man's hunger had long ago become eternal. Within those walls, the Count paced in restless silence. The blood of peasants, soldiers, even nobles no longer stirred his veins with the fire it once did. His thirst had grown beyond the mortal. He sought something that could tear through the chains of damnation itself. Every night he stood at his window, staring into the abyss, wondering if there existed a power higher than death, and if it could be stolen. The villagers feared his shadow. Dracula, however, feared something far more dangerous, his own growing emptiness. Legends had long told of sacred relics hidden deep within the mountains, relics guarded by monks who claimed their sanctity could resist even the touch of hell. Among these, a single whisper reached Dracula's ears, a chalice filled with blood consecrated through divine rite. Unlike mortal veins, this blood did not belong to flesh, but to heaven itself. At first, the rumor seemed little more than a tale spun to keep the desperate faithful. Yet each passing night, the Count felt the story burrow deeper into him, as though it called his name. If mortal blood could grant centuries, what would holy blood unleash? Redemption, or something far worse? The temptation gnawed at him until even his dreams betrayed him. In those restless visions, he wandered endless corridors of his castle, each door sealed, each passage collapsing into ruin. But always at the end, he saw a chalice glowing with a light no darkness could smother. When he reached for it, the light seared his skin, and he awoke with his heart pounding, his fangs aching. He told himself he sought freedom, that perhaps this sacred blood could end his curse. Yet deep down he knew the truth. This was not the pursuit of salvation. It was hunger, pure and insatiable. And hunger is a master that does not forgive. The villagers, unaware of the depth of his desire, began to notice strange signs. Cattle were found drained but not consumed, their carcasses marked with symbols burned into the flesh. The night sky shimmered with unfamiliar constellations, as though the heavens themselves shifted uneasily. A priest who dared to preach against the Count collapsed mid-sermon, blood running from his eyes. To the faithful, these were omens of evil. To Dracula, they were promises, hints that the sacred realm was within reach, and that the barrier between heaven and earth was not as unbreakable as men believed. The more they prayed for protection, the more he felt power stirring in the shadows. And so, the stage was set. Dracula, master of darkness, turned his gaze from the veins of men to the veins of God. The chalice became his obsession, the one treasure he had never taken, the one boundary he had never dared cross. Yet now, with centuries of hunger driving him, hesitation no longer existed. He would claim it, but in choosing to seek holy blood, he would not merely test the strength of his curse. He would test the patience of heaven itself. What he did not know was that heaven, once defied, would not remain silent. The whispers of the chalice became more than rumor when Dracula's spies returned from the mountains with fragments of truth. Hidden in a monastery carved into the cliffs, the relic was said to be sealed behind walls of stone and prayer, guarded by monks who never left its halls. To any other man, such a fortress of faith would be impenetrable. But Dracula was not a man. He was hunger given form. As he listened to their trembling accounts, his hollow eyes brightened with a fever not seen in centuries. The thought that within reach lay not just blood, but holy blood, twisted his lips into a smile. For the first time, his thirst had direction. Yet even in triumph, there was unease. What if this chalice was more than just a vessel? What if it was a trap set by heaven itself? He began his journey under a moonless sky, cloaked not just in shadow but in doubt. As his carriage rattled through the forest, wolves howled, but not in warning. They howled as if mourning what was about to be unleashed. Villages along the way barred their doors, whispering prayers as the count passed. They knew he hunted, though not what. Dracula, however, found their fear amusing. "They pray against me." Not knowing they pray against their own deliverance, he muttered, convincing himself that holy blood would free him from the eternal curse. But deep inside, a darker thought lingered. If divine blood could end his torment, could it also amplify it? Could the chalice turn him into something heaven itself could not destroy? Arriving at the foot of the mountain, he was met not with soldiers or guards, but silence. The monastery loomed above, its bell tower rising like a finger pointed at God. Its door stood closed, but not locked. Inside, monks knelt in prayer, their chants echoing through the stone corridors. Dracula stepped into the sanctum, and for the first time in centuries, he felt resistance, not from men, but from the very air. The incense burned his lungs. The sacred hymns pressed against his skin like knives. Yet with each step, his resolve deepened. If this was a defense of heaven, it would not be enough. Still, he could not ignore the trembling in his hands as he reached the chamber where the chalice awaited. For the first time, fear and hunger were one. The monks rose as one, eyes closed, voices rising in unison. Their prayers were not pleas but commands, their words weaving chains of light around the count. Dracula faltered, his body recoiling from the weight of their faith. For a heartbeat, he felt powerless, like a man stripped of centuries of dominion. But hunger is not so easily denied. With a roar that shook the rafters, he broke their circle, casting monks aside like withered branches. The chalice stood before him on an altar, glowing faintly, its surface reflecting a light that was not fire or moon. He staggered toward it, fangs bared, veins alive with anticipation. Yet as he stretched his hand, the chalice trembled, as if recoiling from him. Could even divine blood refuse the touch of the damned? In that moment, Dracula hesitated, his gaze fixed on the relic. His curse had made him eternal, but never invincible. He knew what awaited, either liberation from his torment or a power that no creature, no angel, no god could undo. The monks, battered but not broken, cried out one last prayer, their voices shaking the stones. The chamber itself seemed to respond, the air thick with dread, the walls sweating with unseen tears. Dracula's hand hovered inches in the chalice, his body torn between terror and longing. And then, with voice that echoed like thunder, he whispered to himself, "No heaven will deny me." His fingers closed around the chalice, and the world held its breath. The chalice was cold against his hand, yet it pulsed as though it carried a heartbeat not its own. Dracula lifted it slowly, the monks screaming in defiance, their chants clashing with the silence of heaven. With one motion, he tipped the vessel, and the consecrated blood touched his lips. At first, it burned like molten fire, scorching his throat, searing his veins. He staggered, clutching at the altar, his body writhing as if torn between life and death. The monks thought they had won, believing divine purity would destroy the monster. But then his cries twisted into laughter, low at first, then rising into a roar that split the rafters. What was meant to cleanse him had not consumed him. It had changed him. The walls of the monastery groaned, cracks racing across stone as though the earth itself recoiled from what had been done. The sacred symbols carved into the chamber walls dimmed, their light turning to ash. Outside, the moon bled crimson and the wolves fell silent. Dracula stood taller now, his eyes glowing with a brilliance that was neither mortal nor infernal. His fangs dripped not with hunger but with radiance, a mockery of sanctity. He looked down at his hands, veins lit with threads of gold and shadow, and for the first time he felt not cursed, but infinite. The monks collapsed in despair, realizing heaven's greatest weapon had been stolen, not by angels, but by the damned. As Dracula stepped forward, the monk's leader raised a crucifix, his voice cracking as he declared, "Heaven will not abandon us." But the Count only smiled, baring his fangs with glow that shattered the cross into dust. The chamber shook violently, and the prayers of the faithful turned into screams. Outside, villagers awoke to the sound of bells tolling themselves, ringing not for worship but for doom. The sky split, releasing ash that fell like snow, covering the land in darkness. For every drop of holy blood that coursed through his veins, heaven dimmed further, its light flickering as if smothered. Dracula whispered, "Your God bleeds through me now," and the air itself trembled at his words. The earth soon mirrored the corruption. Crops withered overnight, rivers turned black, and children were born with pale eyes that never blinked. The sacred relics of churches across the land cracked, their icons fading as though faith itself had been consumed. Even the dead rose uneasily from their graves, drawn by the scent of power that defied both hell and heaven. Dracula did not simply walk the land. He unmade it with every step. Where once he was a predator of men, now he was a predator of worlds. His hunger no longer confined to blood, but to belief itself. The monks, broken and dying, realized too late that in defending the chalice, they had ensured its greatest blasphemy. Yet for all his triumph, Dracula felt a new burden. The holy blood filled him, yes, but it chained him too. His veins carried not only divine strength, but divine wrath. He could feel a presence within, a gaze that never blinked, watching, judging. He had stolen power, but he had also stolen the eye of heaven, and it would never look away. Each night, as he walked through the ashes of burning villages, he heard wings, falling, breaking, crying. Angels, stripped of their light, plummeted like embers from the sky, their descent marking the slow death of heaven itself. And with each fallen angel, Dracula smiled wider, unaware that the same curse tightening around heaven was already coiling around him. Dracula walked through a world undone, each village he passed reduced to silence, each church crumbling to dust. The peasants no longer prayed, for their gods had fallen silent, their icons nothing more than stone and wood. He believed himself untouchable, the new bearer of divine blood, a creature beyond curse or blessing. Yet in the stillness, he began to sense the cost. His body, though stronger than ever, carried within it a burning that never ceased. Each heartbeat was like fire eating through his veins. He had not been redeemed. He had been chained to a throne of pain. Where mortals feared death, Dracula now feared eternity itself, not as predator, but as prisoner of the very power he had stolen. The heavens above bore scars of his transgression. Stars flickered faintly, dimmed by his defiance, while the moon bled endlessly, refusing to heal. The villagers called it the Age of Ash, a time when shadows devoured both night and day. Angels no longer descended to guard the faithful. Instead, they fell lifeless into oceans, into deserts, their wings dissolving into smoke. The faithful saw in this collapse the mark of apocalypse, and whispered that one man's hunger had broken the pact between heaven and earth. Dracula laughed at their despair, but in secret he trembled, for he knew the truth. He had not broken heaven. He had poisoned it, and its poison now lived in him. Rumor spread that the chalice, now empty, had not been consumed entirely. Some whispered that drops of holy blood still clung to the stone, waiting for another to drink. Dracula, hearing these whispers, grew restless. If mortals dared to touch what was his, would they too inherit this cursed fire? Fear of losing his monopoly over divinity drove him into fits of rage. He burned monasteries, slaughtered priests, and erased sacred texts, desperate to ensure no other hand would reach what he had stolen. Yet in his frenzy, he overlooked the prophecy etched into the chalice's base. He who drinks shall bind heaven to his soul, and in his fall, the skies shall burn. It was not a promise of freedom. It was a sentence. The nights grew longer, the days shorter, until the sun itself was swallowed by shadow. In the absence of light, kingdoms crumbled, empires vanished, and humanity was reduced to scattered survivors wandering beneath a sky that no longer offered warmth. Dracula, standing on the ruins of his castle, looked upon this broken world as both ruler and prisoner. He had gained dominion over creation, but in that dominion, he found no joy, no rest, only the gnawing hunger for something he could never satisfy. The holy blood had given him power, but it had stripped him of peace. He was not merely immortal now. He was eternal despair, and the earth was his tomb. And so the legend of Dracula transformed. No longer was he a predator lurking in shadows or a curse whispered in villages. He became Apocalypse embodied, the one who dared to drink what was never meant for man or monster. His name was no longer spoken in fear of fangs, but in fear of finality, the reminder that some hungers can unmake heaven itself. And yet, in the silence of eternity, a question remained unanswered. If Dracula's theft could burn the skies, what vengeance might heaven unleash in return? The world waited, trembling, for an answer that had yet to come.